Greetings to my fellow academic scholars. Today I will be discussing Black homosexuality. This study is an analysis of the Black homosexual experience. Based on the social hierarchy within society, it can be assumed that Black homosexual men and women are the most marginalized group in America. The purpose of this study is to investigate the prevalence of homophobia within the Black community and to examine the experiences of homosexual men and women. This study is significant because the stigmatization of homosexuality can have many different negative consequences for Black homosexuals, including self-esteem issues, psychological distress, and risky sexual practices. This information comes from Stokes and Peterson, 1998. In 1998, Stokes and Peterson conducted a study on Black and Hispanic homosexual men, and the results of this study suggested that the stigmatization of homosexuality caused these men to have low self-esteem, increased levels of psychological distress, and it influenced them to engage in risky sexual behavior. Now for an overview of the presentation. This presentation will discuss stigmatization of Black homosexuality and the impact that homophobia has on the experiences of Black homosexuals. It will also detail the data collection for this study, which included semi-structured interviews and a discourse analysis. And finally, this presentation will include the results and implications of the study. Now for the stigmatization of Black homosexuality and the impacts that it has on Black homosexuals. So factors like respectability politics and Christian values have a significant impact on the stigmatization of homosexuality. Respectability politics are a set of rules that help Black people assimilate to the dominant culture. These rules were established in order to help Black people distance themselves from the negative stereotypes surrounding Blackness. As you may know, homosexuality violates Christian values because the Bible states that homosexuality is quote-unquote an abomination before the Lord. And a lot of Christians use these biblical teachings in order to justify their homophobia. The theoretical framework for this study comes from the social learning theory. This theory suggests that people gain their information through observational learning and behavior modeling. Within the context of this study, this theory can kind of predict how homophobic attitudes have become so prevalent within the Black community and how they have been able to remain consistent over time. So basically, it can be hypothesized that people are simply imitating the homophobic attitudes that they see being displayed by others. As I've already stated, some of the ways that homophobia impacts the experiences of Black homosexuals is by affecting their self-esteem, causing them psychological distress, and influencing them to engage in sexual practices. So now that I have discussed that, I will get into the data collection methods. So the data collection methods for this study were 3 semi-structured interviews with Black homosexuals, and within these interviews, we discussed the stigmatization of homosexuality and the presence of homophobia within the Black community. We also discussed how this homophobia has impacted their experiences, and lastly, we discussed the current changes in perspectives towards Black homosexuality. I also did a discourse analysis on a Black LGBTQ discussion panel, and within this discourse analysis, I identified the common themes within the discussion. I also analyzed the panel's members' choice of words, and then I examined the panel members' experiences within the Black community. So now I will discuss the results and implications of the study. So, as far as the presence of homophobia within the Black community, many of the interview participants mentioned how Christianity was used as justification of homophobia based on biblical authority. This suggests that Christian values significantly contribute to the stigmatization of Black homosexuality. The panel members mentioned how they experienced homophobia within their homes and communities, which gave them negative views towards homosexuality. And this is just an example of the behavior modeling. So another one of the interview participants, they mentioned how they were mistreated by children that presumed that they were homosexual, and that this mistreatment was an example of the children just imitating the homophobia that they've seen within their community. So the reason that they were mistreating the interview participant was because that's what they learned. They learned that you're supposed to mistreat homosexuals. So, in terms of the experiences of homosexuals, social rejection was a major theme. As I just mentioned, a lot of the panel members discussed how they experience homophobia within their community and within their homes. And only one of the interview participants stated that they experienced mistreatment. This was the male participant. He was the only one that stated that he experienced mistreatment as a result of his sexual identity. And within the panel discussion, a lot of participants discussed how their sexual identity caused, well, the rejection of their sexual identity caused them to feel isolated. And one of the interview participants stated that isolation was their only way to protect themselves from the homophobia that's present within the Black community. And the homophobia that's present within the Black community also caused the interview participants as well as the panel discussion members to deny their sexual identity in an effort to just maybe blend in or avoid mistreatment. And concealment of their sexual identity, it goes hand in hand with the denial. They were trying to avoid any type of mistreatment. A lack of positive representation was another major theme within the interview participants' responses, as well as the panel discussion members' accounts. So the lack of positive representation caused many of these participants to adopt a negative view towards homosexuality because they never saw homosexuality painted in a positive light. And these participants also stated that they never had the proper education in order to understand homosexuality. Queer erasure was another major topic that was brought up during the panel discussion, in how Black queer people have been erased from Black history, which caused them to not have any positive representation of homosexuality. And during this discussion, they mentioned people like George Washington Carver and James Baldwin, and how the fact that these Black leaders, the fact that they were queer, that was erased from Black history, and it left Black homosexuals with no positive representation. So some of the implications for this study include adherence to Christian values results in negative attitudes towards homosexuality. Christian values also influence Black people who are not active Christians, and the marginalization of Black homosexuals is a result of racial oppression. So, as I previously mentioned, Christian values and respectability politics have a significant influence on the prevalence of homophobic attitudes within the Black community. And the adoption of Christian values and the adoption of respectability politics was a way for Black people to kind of distance themselves from the negative stereotypes that are associated with Blackness. So racial oppression directly influenced the treatment of Black homosexuals. Now for the conclusion. So, based on the information presented in this study, it can be concluded that the stigmatization of Black homosexuality is a result of respectability politics and Christian values. It can also be concluded that the prevalence of homophobia is a result of, a result of observational learning and behavior modeling. Lastly, it can be concluded that homophobia impacts the experiences of Black homosexuals by contributing to their social rejection and their lack of positive representation. In my opinion, in order to effectively address the presence of homophobia within the Black community, there needs to be a complete shift from the heteronormative ideologies of Black culture that come from respectability politics and Christian values. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed.